Now, we're getting back into the news as Hamas continues to toy with everyone and creates negotiation difficulties. This coincidentally includes Muslim-majority countries that, to put it mildly, don't like Israel at all, pressuring the United States to move the ceasefire agreement to the next stage, even though Hamas has not yet fulfilled the entire agreement of the first stage. But more than that, Turkey is sticking its nose so that holding everything up. Where do things stand? Who said that and why? What are the interests of everybody? And are Erdogan's fondest hopes coming true? Are thousands of Turkish soldiers on their way to the Gaza Strip? The Turkish army has completed preparations for possible entry into the Gaza Strip, and the United States is pressuring Israel to allow their presence. So, Mati, please give us a closer look at this complicated situation and answer some of these questions. So, over to you, Mati.
Thank you, Yair. Indeed, we're still waiting for phase 2 to materialize in the Gaza Strip. And let me break down the dramatic changes and developments that have happened in recent weeks. This has not been a static process. It's been something quick moving, very, very substantial, and yet still tense on the ground. So over the next couple minutes, I'm going to break down everything that's happening in the Gaza Strip and how we're going to get from where we are today, which is the end of phase A of the agreement, to phase B of the agreement. So first of all, let's give a quick status report on where we're at in the Gaza Strip. We've walked through most of what was phase 1. Phase 1 is the return of the hostages to Israel. Almost all of them, except for one, have been returned. And of course, Israel in return withdraws to the yellow line and then ultimately outside of the Gaza Strip, that's in phase B, and releases countless Hamas terrorists and Palestinian Authority terrorists back to the Palestinian Authority, Judea and Samaria, and also into the Gaza Strip. That too has already been done. And then phase B, which is the big change, is yet to happen. Phase B is supposed to be someone else, not Israeli, not American, boots on the ground inside the Gaza Strip that will be working directly to police, to be a technocrat government that rules, controls, and takes care of what happens on the ground in the Gaza Strip, and that, of course, moves forward into an era where Hamas is now the one controlling logistics, humanitarian effort, and everyday life in the Gaza Strip. That linchpin has not happened yet. That has been the point of pressure, the point of work, the point of attention for both the US and several other entities in this region, and of course, a cause for concern, for attention, and for much military action on the Israeli side. So let's break down what it's going to take to get to phase B and what has happened in recent days that is preventing us from getting there. Now let's first of all start with phase A. Phase A was the return of all hostages to Israel, and guess what? Hamas and the Islamic Jihad have not been men of their word. What a shocker, or isn't it, of course? We're still waiting to receive the last murdered hostage held in Hamas captivity. Now here's where it gets interesting. As we're trying to transition from phase A into phase B, Hamas and Islamic Jihad continuously claim that Israel is the one that's violating the ceasefire agreement. But on the ground, of course, who is violating the ceasefire agreement? Hamas terrorists that attack IDF soldiers on a regular basis, that try to operate in an armed fashion and regroup and regather weapons once more, and most importantly, refuse to return the last hostage. Again, this is a deceased hostage back into the hands of Israeli forces. Now, Hamas claim and Islamic Jihad claim that they don't know where this hostage is. But the truth is, of course, that they do. So much so that Israel has publicly said several times, we've sent them the exact coordinates multiple times, saying we know exactly where the body is held, we know where it is, go get it. And they've refused to do so repeatedly. They're doing this, of course, because they never had any plan of entering into phase B. They fear the day where they would have to leave the Gaza Strip behind and or seek asylum in other countries or be disarmed from their weapons. That's not something they're working towards and not something they've ever wanted. That was pressure from external forces, the Turks, the Americans, the Qataris on Hamas leadership, that they are hope against hope, that they would never have to live up to, that's a day they never have to see come. So they're doing everything in their power, including holding on to the remains of a murdered hostage, to not move into phase B, which phase B means someone else entering on the ground into the Gaza Strip. So the big challenge for the American government for the Trump White House is really setting up someone else in Gaza to govern life. And let me break down to you what that means. It means there needs to be a technocrat government, which is a term that's used often. People that are part of the Palestinian people, as in within Judea and Samaria and the Gaza Strip, they would take care of civil life. How do you collect taxes? How do you distribute humanitarian aid? How do you rebuild the infrastructure throughout the Gaza Strip? How do you rebuild the school system? How do you build the medical system? But the key component has not materialized yet. The key component is boots on the ground. And that's not just because it's the name of this show, it's boots on the ground because that is the key point. That is the pivot point from Israeli forces, from IDF on the ground in the Gaza Strip, to a point where we have what? Someone else. Not American, not Israeli. So who is supposed to be on the ground? Well, two main names that have been sort of spread through the air in recent weeks, months, are Indonesia and Azerbaijan. And both of them have still gone back and forth about whether or not they're able to or wanting to. It almost seems like they're negotiating for what the price is going to be for their involvement. But there's another element that's really wanting to be on the ground, which is the Turkish government. And week after week, they knock on the door of the US and Israel and say, guys, we just want to remind you that we want to be part of the force on the ground. And they say it again and again. Israel on its hand has said repeatedly that they veto, or we veto any option, any thought of having Turkish forces on the ground in Israel. Just as a quick reminder, the Turkish government is adversarial and hateful towards the state of Israel and the government of Israel, and that's on a good day. And on a bad day, they're anti-Semitic, Holocaust deniers, and make threats against the lives of officials in the Israeli government. So this is very much not a friendly relationship. Turkish President Erdogan, he has a huge chip on his shoulder against Israel and the Zionist movement in general, and Israel observes that, sees their active support of terrorism both in recent years and in past years, and says, not on our watch. And yet Turkey, every time the topic comes up, they remind everyone, guys, we want you to remember that the option is there. As far as the Israeli government is concerned, as far as Prime Minister Netanyahu, Minister of Defense Katz are concerned, that's a no-go. There will be no agreement that includes Turkish forces on the ground. Now, another really big hurdle to cross when it relates to entering into Phase B in the Gaza Strip is what are the conditions of safety for Israel. Right now, Israeli forces are located on what is called the Yellow Line in the Gaza Strip, which means we withdrew, this is a while back now, withdrew out of the main city centers, but hold on to control over the Philadelphia corridor, which is the border with Egypt and Sinai, hold over to the main traffic routes between the cities in the Gaza Strip to maintain protection to the people of Israel, so we don't once again have an October 7th situation where Hamas can storm the fences or the border with Israel straight into our country. But two very problematic things are happening right now. There seems to be a sense of urgency, both in the White House and in Arab countries around us, to try and find any kind of solution, even if it's not a full and real solution for the situation in Gaza. I'll give you an example of that. One of the topics the Israeli government is pushing back on is the statement that we're going to follow a timeline that is based on dates and not actions. And the Israeli government says repeatedly and openly in multiple press releases, in multiple press conferences, it says the following: we're not concerned with a date. The fact that the Trump administration and other countries have said that there will be other boots on the ground and Phase 2 will start in the beginning of 2026, let's say January, February, it doesn't really matter at this point. And we're not concerned with that in Israel. Our concern is who's going to be on the ground and have they truly folded out, laid out all their forces so the Israeli forces can withdraw. Without that fully happening, without that true transition taking place, the Israeli government says it could be March, it could be April, it could be May of 2026. We're not withdrawing until the true solution materializes. On the Trump White House, in several other capital cities around the region and Europe, there's a desire to close this deal, to really bring it to a final moment where we can say, here we are, Victory Day has taken place, and it's happened. And Israel pushes back on that and says, we're simply not going to move forward because the date has arrived. We want to see the milestone hit on the ground. This whole process, the Phase 2 ceasefire agreement, is all hinging on this regional coalition. It was Egypt, it was Qatar, it was the Turkish government, behind the scenes, of course, the Americans, and to a lesser degree, several European countries that are also somewhat involved, let's put it this way, in the day after solution. And of course, behind the scenes, the Qataris, and maybe one day the Saudis will also be involved. The problem is, some of these countries are not so sure they want to be part of it. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get some kind of assurances from the American government of or financial incentives or a better place at the table when it comes to the day after in the Gaza Strip. So the big move here again is the ability of the United States to draw in the different countries, the Egyptians, the Qataris, and several others that I'll get to in a second, to really make the move forward in this region. Now, one big thing here that needs to be remembered is that the details here are the most important part. It's not about the big picture, it's about exactly how every phase plays out. I'll give you one example that's been negotiated over this last week. One key point for phase 2 was the disarmament and the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. What does that mean? That means Hamas gives up its weapons, hands them over to a third party, and is removed as a fighting force from the Gaza Strip. But suddenly there's conversation, in part related to the Egyptian government's involvement, that is saying we don't need to fully disarm Hamas, we need to freeze the military situation on the ground, which means they'll deposit the weapons for an interim period, but we're not really removing them fully. Israel, of course, looks at that with huge concern and says, absolutely not. We did not fight for 2 years to allow Hamas to regain weapons the day after the agreement is signed, and it's signed in its next phase. That's just one example of many, many such problems and hurdles that need to be overcome to move on to the next phase. Next days and weeks are going to be dramatic and important for this region. And what's going to really determine how the next years and possibly decades look is the ability of the Trump White House to really force through a regional resolution that puts boots on the ground in the Gaza Strip that are not Israeli or American. They might be a mixture of multiple Muslim countries, Indonesia, possibly others. We don't really know yet. Definitely not the Turkish government if you're asking the Israeli government what they think about the topic. And then the next piece in the puzzle is fully and finally stabilizing Lebanon and Syria. And I know that's not connected to Gaza 2.0, but it is connected to regional stability. The eyes of the world are now on the US government and on the Israeli government to see if we can take this entire 2-year phase into the next phase, which is not warfare. There's no way to fight through. There's no way to shoot a peace agreement. The only way we're going to be able to really change this region is by rebuilding. And rebuilding requires replacing the government of the Gaza Strip, replacing Hamas with someone who's trying to rebuild, and doing something right, virtuous, and good for people and a region that has suffered more than enough. This all hinges on the ability of the Trump White House to pull in and force a resolution that draws in these other members of the region. And what we might see in weeks and months to come could transform this region for decades ahead of us. If Gaza is stabilized and followed by Lebanon and Syria, we could see the Saudis enter into an agreement, which we've talked about extensively. And that could really reshape this region in a way that is positive and pushes back every evil and negative Iranian influence on this region for decades forward. And that, in my opinion, is something worth praying for, calling your politician and your regional politicians for. It's something worth pushing for and striving for, because that could change the lives of tens of millions of people in this region. That's it for today. Now back to Yair Pinto.
The IDF spokesperson reported this week on airstrikes that destroyed a training and qualification compound of the Withdrawal Force, a special unit of the Hezbollah terrorist organization in southern Lebanon. Some of the strikes took place north of the Litani River, 30 kilometers from the border, but the IDF says that these are still routine strikes aimed at thwarting Hezbollah's military buildup. In addition, rocket launching compounds in the south that Hezbollah had rebuilt were also attacked, as Hezbollah continues to prepare thousands of rockets and dozens of launchers all over southern Lebanon for the possibility of renewing a confrontation with the Jewish state of Israel. And in a related story, the United States Congress is expected to discuss a bill this week to amend the terms of a military aid to Lebanon's internationally recognized government. The amendment states that American support shall be used solely to improve the ability of the Lebanese army to deal with the threat posed by Hezbollah and any other terrorist organization that threatens the security of Lebanon and its neighbors. France is also working to change the situation in southern Lebanon. In negotiations between Lebanon and Israel, and in regards to France's role on the ceasefire monitoring committee, while emphasizing the need for the actions of the Lebanese army to align with the mission assigned to it in order to ensure the continued external support, from France, from the United States, and other nations around the world. However, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has adopted the strategy of pretending that there is no problem that needs to be solved, rejecting the accusations that the Lebanese army is not fulfilling its obligations under the ceasefire agreement, and declaring that the army units had fully completed their missions since their deployment 1 year ago. And meanwhile, the Lebanese newspaper Nida El Watan reported this week that about 15 days ago, 4 UAVs were confiscated as part of a shipment that arrived from China via the port of Tripoli in Lebanon. According to the report, which cited senior security officials, the aircraft were transferred to Lebanese military intelligence. So the sources confirmed that each aircraft is capable of carrying an estimated weight of about 14 kilograms of explosives and additional items, and that it is forbidden to bring them into Lebanon because of their security use. But apparently, someone decided to do it anyway. The investigations further revealed that the shipment was registered under the name of a fictitious company, which raised further suspicions regarding the purpose of bringing these aircrafts into Lebanon. And with all of this in mind, after this week's strike in Lebanon against the Radwan forces, and following the waves of attacks in recent weeks, the defense establishment estimates that Hezbollah is once again losing assets, but not on the scale that manages to halt its buildup. Currently, most of the strikes are being carried out in southern Lebanon, alongside more limited strikes in the Bekaa Valley and in Beirut. But Hezbollah still has additional assets, some of them significant in areas where Israel has not yet operated, at least not officially. In related news, UNIFIL, the United Nations Peace Force in southern Lebanon, is expected to withdraw from the area at the end of 2026 after almost 50 years of deployment. Israeli officials said that they view this activity as a complete failure, and in some years even as a collaboration with the Hezbollah terrorist organization. However, the Lebanese government seeks to bring in a replacement force that will fill the expected security vacuum that will be created by the UNIFIL's withdrawal in order to maintain stability on the border with Israel. In this move as well, the Intelligence Directorate sees potential for deterioration, a point that Hezbollah may exploit to inflame the area. And amidst all of this, the IDF is considering an escalation in its preemptive strike against Hezbollah, as well as hitting targets deeper inside Lebanon, and not just south of the Litani River, but it is running into opposition from the White House. President Trump is aware that Hezbollah has returned to entrench itself on the Israeli border, which constitutes a clear danger that must be eradicated. But his desire for peace at almost any price has so far prompted him to hold back on Israel's plans to hit Hezbollah with heavier strikes. Another factor that Intelligence Directorate personnel are monitoring is regional developments. For instance, recently the Iraqi government published a new list of terrorist organizations in which surprisingly the Houthis in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon are appearing. The move sparked harsh protests from pro-Iranian factions and elements in Baghdad. Now the question arises whether parts of the Arab world are beginning to understand and distinguish from themselves who are the terrorist Shiite organizations which are developing alongside their borders, and they are closely watching this development. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report the whole truth, and we need your help in order to keep spreading this content so it reaches more people around the world, and together we will defeat the lies, we will defeat evil. And now we're switching our focus once again to developments in Syria, where at least on paper, it's looked like there have been a lot of positive changes. This includes images of fireworks over Damascus, music from cars, a new flag on balconies, and billboards with slogans like "One state, one people," and "The dark era is over." But behind the celebrations stands a reality that directly endangers Israel. Now, in recent days, a video has been circulated of a military parade in Damascus marking 1 year since the fall of the Assad regime, including soldiers of the new Syrian army composed of former rebel organizations that were documented waving Palestinian flags and shouting, "Gaza is a slogan, victory and steadfastness. I will make from my blood ammunition, and from your blood I will make rivers." Syrian sources admit that the chants reflect growing hostility towards Israel due to the IDF strikes and threats against the regime in Damascus, even if they claim that the soldiers violate protocol. From Israel's perspective, the result is clear: a regime that allows violent incitement against the Zionist entity. This is happening while al-Julani presents himself to the entire world as a so-called pragmatic leader, and he meets with Western leaders, including President Trump, and tries to market a new Syria that deals only with reconstruction and not with terror. This video, together with footage of massacres that his men carried out against Druze and Alawites in Syria, minority groups in that country, reveals how misleading the image of stability and renewal really is. And furthermore, the Palestinian channel El-Quds exposed additional footage this week of a Hamas parade in Gaza in February 2025, and in a parade of the Syrian army in Damascus this week, during which the exact same slogan is being heard: "Gaza, Gaza, bombing and destruction. I'm coming to you, my enemy." This is the same text and the same jihadist spirit. This connection between Hamas and the army of the al-Julani regime illustrates that the Syrian front is increasingly aligning itself with the Hamas terrorist organization. Meanwhile, in the Quneitra area, Syrian media documented a convoy of regime gunmen driving in armed pickup trucks right next to the IDF military vehicles this week. And shortly afterward, during an IDF operation in Khan Arnabech, a riot developed with stones thrown at the soldiers, and the IDF applied the standard arrest procedure, fired warning shots in the air, and when the instigators did not retreat, shot them in the lower body and dispersed the incident. At the same time, protests against Israel were reported, as well as UAV activity in the skies of that area. Remember that about 2 weeks ago, a reserve force from the 55 Brigade entered the village of Beit Jin in southern Syria for an arrest operation against operatives of Al-Jama'ah al-Ismailiyah, who were planning attacks against Israel. In the battle, heavy exchanges of fire developed. 6 soldiers were wounded, 3 seriously, but all the wanted men were arrested and several terrorists were eliminated. According to an Arab source, the detainees admitted that they had received funding from Hamas and from Hezbollah in order to arm themselves and to carry out attacks against Israel. And on the diplomatic front, the United States ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, and Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, toured the border region this week, receiving briefings on the threats from Syria and from Lebanon, and discussed Hezbollah's military buildup and the Iranian threat through its proxies. Talks behind the scenes between Israeli and Syrian officials are reportedly ongoing, but so far there are no concrete results. Bottom line, while the new regime in Damascus tries to sell the world a new Syria, so to speak, the footage from its streets and army, the connection of Hamas and Hezbollah, and the daily friction with the IDF shows Israel a completely different reality that includes the same hatred, a new enemy, and a northern front that demands a watchful eye. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development on this issue, so keep spreading the truth, and now we'll move quickly to the situation with Iran, which goes far beyond the threat from a rebuilt arsenal of ballistic missiles. The head of Israel's National Cyber Directorate revealed in the opening address at the annual Cyber Week at Tel Aviv University on Tuesday that Iran's Ayatollah regime is engaged in constant online attacks against Israel. For instance, behind the ransomware attack on the Shamir Medical Center on Yom Kippur, there actually stood an Iranian attack group which hid behind a digital crime gang in order to blur its tracks. During Operation Rising Lion in June, 1,200 Iranian influence companies against Israeli citizens were identified, and millions of Israelis were exposed to messages and videos intended to confuse and to frighten them while undermining trust in Israeli security and public welfare institutions. At the same time, Iran is collecting information on military, governmental, and academic targets and is moving from espionage to attacks aimed at distribution and destruction. Israel is ranked as the third most attacked country in the world in cyber, absorbing 3.5% of all global attacks in a year, putting it in the same league as major powers with a daily threat. Meanwhile, about half a year after the 12-day war, the crisis around Iran's nuclear program is stuck. The International Atomic Energy Agency has conducted 12 inspections in Iran, but not a single one at the sites that were bombed. And according to this data, enrichment has not resumed, but there is suspicious activity at a new site near Natanz and in a tunnel area near Isfahan, which appear ready for future use. The Board of Governors demanded that Iran allow full access to all its facilities. They report what happened to the 3 sites that were hit, and they also need to give prior notice of any new nuclear site. Tehran responded by canceling the agreement that was signed in Cairo in September, which was intended to renew inspections. They also declared that it would continue to advance its nuclear plans despite everything that's going on. Iran officially remains within the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but its actions are making this less relevant. However, if it officially withdraws from the treaty, this will be understood as a step towards nuclear weapons, exposing it to harsh sanctions and possibly another attack. There is also no clear way out of the United States negotiations that stopped after the Israeli strike in June 2025, and since then, both sides speak of principled willingness without moving forward. Washington demands an end to the enrichment and the arming of Iran's proxies in the Middle East and limits on the missile program of Iran. And Tehran keeps declaring that enrichment is a legal right and otherwise refuses American demands. Meanwhile, to deter a new strike, Iran is escalating its threats against Israel, while the IDF warns about an Iran that is more prepared and better armed, hinting it might strike first if it thinks that Israel is approaching an attack, and emphasizing the quantities of missiles that is producing at this very moment and the damage that it threatens to inflict in the next war. Behind this noise hides a very real fear of the regime from internal collapse and from a focused blow against it, not only against the nuclear facilities. In other words, this situation is very dangerous for Israel and for the whole world, so please be in urgent prayer for it. And while you're at it, make sure you pray for Israel, as we're getting hit this very week by a powerful winter storm. You can see I'm soaking wet here, and we need all the prayers that we can get. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for praying for the situation, praying for our leaders. Let's pray for your leaders also. Let's pray for all the innocent lives, and let's pray for the people of Iran, people of the Gaza Strip, the people of Lebanon, to have better leaders and to stop hating on the Jewish people, start loving on this land and on God's promises. Okay? God promised amazing things for all of us if we just follow Him. So keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem, guys.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.